The bust didn't just shake up the biker world, it redefined how organized crime operates in America. In a sweeping operation called Iron Horse, the DEA and FBI dismantled a sprawling logistics network tied to the Hells Angels Motorcycle Club and two of Mexico's most powerful drug cartels, the Sinaloa Cartel and CJNG. This wasn't your typical drug raid. What investigators uncovered went far beyond street-level dealing or biker turf wars.
If you enjoyed this breakdown, don't forget to like, subscribe, and drop a comment. Your feedback helps shape what we cover next, and you being here keeps the conversation going. Thanks for watching. See you in the next one.
Real shipping manifests, real numbers. But behind those perfectly filed documents were shipments loaded with narcotics, military-grade weapons, and stacks of cash moved with precision, disguised as auto parts or industrial equipment. The logistics model was straight out of a military playbook. The network stretched across 5 U.S. states and into Canada, using encrypted communications, GPS masking, and cloned RFID tags to operate in plain sight. These weren't just rogue operators with fast bikes and bad tattoos, they were part of a calculated, scalable supply chain. The Hells Angels, once synonymous with rebellion and counterculture, had evolved into a cold, coordinated transport franchise working hand-in-glove with international cartels. The operation hit hardest in Chicago, where the task force raided a hub that served as a key node in the entire operation. What they found wasn't just drugs, it was a glimpse into a parallel system, a criminal infrastructure that mimicked legitimate freight logistics down to the smallest detail. Trucks were outfitted with hidden compartments, route data was manipulated to avoid detection, and everything was tracked using encrypted comms and spoofed GPS signals. At the heart of it were the front companies. Over 30 firms, some small, others full-scale logistics operations, all licensed and all hiding in plain sight. These companies weren't just laundering money, they were physically moving product up and down I-55, across state lines, and eventually north into Canada through ports like Montreal, where the Hells Angels Canadian chapters took over. These weren't independent cells, they were coordinated. The cartels supplied the product. The Hells Angels ran the trucks. The Canadian chapters facilitated distribution and money movement. Guns, drugs, and dollars cycled across the border in both directions. Narcotics went north. Cash and weapons came south. All of it flowing through a logistics pipeline built to withstand scrutiny, roadblocks, and raids. Law enforcement had no choice but to change tactics. This wasn't about kicking down doors and grabbing street dealers anymore. This was infrastructure-level crime, so the response had to match. Agencies used drones, traffic analysis powered by AI, surveillance on warehouses and freight terminals, financial monitoring through offshore accounts and crypto wallets. The operation became less about seizing drugs and more about collapsing the supply chain. That meant tracing every manifest, decrypting every message, and freezing every linked account. It was digital warfare in real time, because that's the threat now. Not scattered gangs or isolated smuggling runs, but hybrid networks operating like multinational companies, with headquarters, with logistics departments, with IT systems designed to mask activity. And the transformation of the Hells Angels was front and center. They're no longer just bikers. They're facilitators, transporters, middlemen between cartel producers and international buyers. The myth of the lone rebel biker has been replaced by a highly organized operation with layers of secrecy and routes mapped like commercial shipping lanes. Canadian chapters weren't just involved, they were essential. Ports like Montreal were used to move narcotics into Canada, while outbound routes funneled weapons and drug proceeds back into the U.S. through hidden compartments and offshore financial systems. This wasn't just organized crime, it was transnational logistics disguised as commerce. Military-grade weapons were found during the raids, not sidearms, not home-modified rifles, real, combat-ready firearms. This wasn't protection, it was preparation. These operations were built to defend themselves, to secure routes, to withstand pressure. The cartels and biker clubs weren't just resisting law enforcement. They were gearing up like paramilitary units. This operation shattered the idea that U.S. borders are only vulnerable at the edges. The truth is much broader. The entire U.S. interior has become part of the smuggling route. Highways, freight hubs, rest stops, digital banking systems, all of it's being used as infrastructure in what now looks less like criminal activity and more like a supply chain war. In response, law enforcement has had to rethink everything. The focus is no longer on the street corner. It's on the route, the channel, the money flow. Because you can't just arrest one driver or seize one shipment when there are 30 more trucks on the road, all connected by encrypted apps and backed by offshore accounts. This isn't about stopping crime at the border, it's about dismantling an entire ecosystem that exists within the legal economy. And that's what makes it so hard to combat. These networks use real companies, real drivers, real paperwork. The trucks pass inspections, the cargo gets scanned, but inside those pallets of auto parts is meth, fentanyl, cocaine. Inside those wiring shipments, cash, weapons, hidden panels. The blend of legitimacy and deception makes it nearly invisible.
If you enjoyed this breakdown, don't forget to like, subscribe, and drop a comment. Your feedback helps shape what we cover next, and you being here keeps the conversation going. Thanks for watching. See you in the next one.
Doesn't die with one arrest. It adapts, it reroutes, it regenerates. What makes this operation so significant isn't just the size. It's the shift in law enforcement philosophy. Agencies are now treating these groups as organized, technologically equipped threats not unlike hostile entities. The Hells Angels and the cartels they work with aren't just dealing drugs. They're running a war economy. The raids led to huge seizures, millions in cash, tons of narcotics, a cache of military-grade arms. But those aren't the headline. The real story is that for the first time, law enforcement responded to a criminal network not with street busts but with supply chain disruption. This is the future of fighting transnational crime, route control, digital tracing, and dismantling logistics. The U.S. border doesn't start at the crossing anymore. It starts at the truck depot, the freight yard, the warehouse. It runs through encrypted apps and moves with shipments that look entirely legal. That's the challenge now. The enemy is invisible. It's embedded in commerce, hiding in plain sight. And until that's understood at every level, these networks will keep adapting. Let's talk about it. Are you surprised by how deep this network went? Have you noticed legitimate companies being used for illegitimate purposes where you live? Drop your thoughts in the comments, share this if it opened your eyes to how organized crime really moves, and subscribe if you want more deep dives into the modern battlegrounds of crime, logistics, and law enforcement. The most unsettling part: this network didn't look illegal until it was ripped open. To anyone on the outside, these companies had all the trappings of legitimacy: office leases, tax filings, freight licenses, DOT numbers, even proper insurance. But behind those polished facades were fleets of trucks doubling as mobile vaults, cross-border couriers for the most dangerous organizations in the Western Hemisphere. All of it rooted through shell firms so layered and cleanly registered, they evaded scrutiny for years. The Hells Angels weren't just riding shotgun, they were orchestrating entire lanes of smuggling activity. They didn't need a seat at the cartel table, they built the table. Chapters from Illinois to Ontario acted like regional managers in a logistics operation that operated more like Amazon than any old-school gang. We're talking about a biker gang that used to be known for bar fights and leather jackets, now managing blockchain wallets, RFID tech, and compartmentalized freight schedules. The evolution is staggering. They've gone from rebels to logistical tacticians. And the sophistication didn't stop at the roads. Every shipment was disguised. You'd see boxes labeled brake pads or hydraulic parts on the bill of lading. But inside, vacuum-sealed kilos of methamphetamine, Glock pistols hidden in the walls of shipping containers, even crypto wallets taped to false panels. Every item had two identities, the one on paper and the one on the street. This level of concealment isn't random. It's strategic. These cartels aren't just exporting drugs, they're exporting a system. One that mirrors global supply chains down to the language, the scheduling, the documentation. Except it's a system built to evade, outmaneuver, and persist. That's what Operation Iron Horse was up against. Not just a criminal gang but an infrastructure. And it's not just about the product. It's about what flows back after delivery. After the drugs are dropped, those same trucks make the return journey packed with millions in cash or untraceable weapons. U.S. cities become drop points, collection hubs, and then redistribution nodes. All of it disguised under the flow of legal commerce. The routes were mapped with shocking precision. Interstates were chosen based on risk profiles. Drivers were rotated constantly. Truck cabs were swapped to confuse scanners. GPS tracking devices were spoofed. And communications locked down with end-to-end encrypted platforms the average person wouldn't even know how to download. In some cases, law enforcement found cloned RFID tags, allowing these trucks to impersonate legitimate fleets. That meant they were slipping past port authorities, customs checks, and even weigh stations without raising a single red flag. And still until Operation Iron Horse no one put it all together. Why? Because the face of the operation looked clean. Every license matched. Every barcode scanned. Every invoice balanced. This was a machine designed not just to hide but to blend. It's not that authorities weren't looking. It's that the network was built to look like it belonged. That's why this bust hit so hard. It wasn't about the product seized, it was about the system exposed. Law enforcement realized the only way to combat this wasn't to chase individual shipments, it was to dismantle the network's ability to function. That meant targeting the trucking companies, the warehouses, the financial intermediaries. They began freezing crypto wallets, mapping offshore accounts, flagging wire transfers disguised as freight settlements. Because every route, every vehicle, every dollar, they all fed the same beast. It also forced a massive recalibration in how organized crime is defined. These aren't just gangs with muscle. They're operating with business plans, logistics modeling, IT support, and financial strategy. And the bikers, they're not freelancing, they're embedded operators in a system that moves more like a defense contractor than a drug ring. That's why federal agencies started framing these groups as hybrid threats. Not because they dress like soldiers but because they act like them. Strategic supply management, encrypted communications, armed protection, infrastructure redundancy. It's not just drug crime anymore, it's crime as a service. And that's where Canada's role becomes unavoidable. Montreal wasn't just a destination, it was a processing center. Canadian Hells Angels chapters served as import agents for narcotics flowing north. Then, once the product was distributed across Canadian provinces, the money flowed back down into the US and onward to Mexico. The return shipments were often loaded with firearms, high-capacity magazines, and cash hidden inside false cargo walls, secret compartments, even inside legal goods. These aren't one-off runs. They're repeatable, scalable circuits designed to move millions of dollars worth of product across borders weekly, with little interference. And let's be clear, this wasn't just enabled by the Hells Angels muscle, it was made possible by their legitimacy. Chapters with registered clubhouses, businesses in their names, established ties in multiple jurisdictions. And that's what gave them access. They weren't sneaking around, they were walking through the front door. Even more unsettling, some of the front companies were subcontracting work to real, unaware third parties, innocent drivers, real dispatchers, completely above-board warehouses. And through that chain of subcontracting, the criminal activity became harder to trace. Legality was used as a cloak, not just a front. This is why Operation Iron Horse didn't end with a single set of arrests. It sparked an ongoing audit and infrastructure dissection of trucking, freight forwarding, and logistics companies nationwide. Because once you realize the extent to which these networks have embedded themselves into legitimate business, the scale of the challenge becomes staggering. We're not just talking about street crime anymore. This is a supply chain war, one that spans coast to coast, crosses borders, and blends so thoroughly into legal operations that you need forensic accounting and deep surveillance just to tell what's real and what's criminal. This shift in criminal strategy is changing the face of law enforcement. Street busts are out. Digital surveillance, financial tracking, data analysis, that's where the focus is now. Agencies are partnering with private logistics firms, scanning driver logs, cross-referencing manifests, and flagging discrepancies in cross-border shipment patterns. Because the new battlefield isn't a street corner, it's a logistics terminal, a data center, a wire transfer queue. And while the seizures from Operation Iron Horse are massive tons of narcotics, millions in cash, military-grade weapons, the deeper victory is in exposure. Pulling back the curtain on a system designed to exist right under everyone's nose. What happens next is critical. Law enforcement knows the network won't stop. It'll rewire, shift states, rename its LLCs, reassign drivers. That's what these systems are built to do, adapt. But now that it's been cracked open, the next phase is about disruption. Keeping it from rebuilding, following the financial trails, blocking the routes, freezing the money. And that means one thing: this isn't over. Operation Iron Horse wasn't a finale. It was a starting point, a signal that the fight against transnational organized crime has officially moved into a new chapter. Not in back alleys, not in motel room deals, but in shipping yards, customs terminals, and encrypted chat rooms. Because the cartels aren't just trafficking drugs, they're exporting a model. And unless governments keep pace, that model will keep spreading underneath the surface of legitimate commerce. The scariest part: most of us probably passed these trucks every day and never thought twice. They weren't rolling down the highway with gang insignias or flags waving. These were clean, white semi-trailers, company logos, paperwork in order, plates registered, no reason to stop them. And that's exactly the point. This wasn't back alley drug running, it was organized trafficking wrapped in highway safety vests and signed delivery forms. It shows how far modern crime has come, not just in scale but in strategy. This wasn't about brute force, it was about invisibility. These networks didn't want to raise alarms, they wanted to operate forever, quietly, efficiently, profitably, and they nearly pulled it off. The Hells Angels didn't just evolve, they professionalized. Gone are the days of dirty cash stashed in saddlebags. Now it's cryptocurrency wallets routed through offshore exchanges, wire transfers hidden in fake invoice payments, cash converted to crypto, then moved across borders digitally before anyone can trace it. And even when authorities got close, they hit encrypted walls. The clubs used high-end communication platforms that even some intelligence agencies had trouble cracking. Messages disappeared, devices were wiped, tracking efforts were rerouted. This wasn't just savvy, it was militarized. That's why Operation Iron Horse had to go big. This wasn't about catching a couple of guys in a warehouse. This was about pulling up the roots of an entire criminal logistics tree. And to do that, law enforcement didn't just need local task forces, they needed federal coordination, cross-border cooperation, tech experts, cyber teams, forensics. Every tool that normally gets deployed for national security threats was activated because this was a national security threat. And the message couldn't be clearer. The days of treating organized crime like a street problem are over. The success of this operation also exposed a painful reality: just how much of our legitimate infrastructure has been co-opted. These networks weren't working outside the system, they were working within it. They found the loopholes, they bought the companies, they used legal frameworks to launder illegal operations. They didn't hack the system, they learned how to operate it better than anyone else. And it's not just the Hells Angels. Thanks so much for watching. If you made it all the way to the end, you're officially part of the small percentage of people who don't just click away, and that means a lot. Before you go, I'd love to hear from you. Drop a comment below and tell me your thoughts, your ideas, or even what you'd like to see next. I read every single one of them, and your feedback genuinely shapes the direction of this channel. If you enjoyed the video, tap that like button, it tells YouTube this content is worth sharing. And if you haven't already, hit subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next upload. We've got more exciting videos coming, and trust me, you'll want to be here for them. This channel is just getting started, and your support helps it grow faster than you realize. Thank you again for spending a part of your day here with me. Stay curious, stay motivated, and as always, take care of yourself. Until next time, I'll see you in the next video.